In 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States military presented a plan to the Secretary of Defense. The plan proposed staging terrorist attacks on American citizens, bombings, hijackings, assassinations, and blaming them on Cuba to justify an invasion. This is not a theory. Every word of it is in the National Archives. It has a name, Operation Northwoods. The document is dated March 13, 1962. The classification was top secret, special handling. The title, Justification for U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba. The author, General Lyman Lemnitzer, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The recipient, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. This was not a fringe memo. This was not a field officer going rogue. This was the highest uniformed military body in the United States formally proposing, in writing, with operational specificity, that the American government should commit acts of terrorism against its own people to manufacture a pretext for war. The plan had a name before it had a signature, Operation Northwoods. Understand the context. The year is 1962. The Bay of Pigs invasion, a CIA-backed attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro using Cuban exiles, had failed catastrophically in April of 1961. The Kennedy administration was humiliated internationally. The CIA and military brass were furious. Many believed Kennedy had lost his nerve by refusing to provide air support to the invasion force. The push to try again, to find any justification for direct military intervention in Cuba, was intense. Operation Northwoods was that justification, engineered from scratch. The document laid out specific proposals. Not vague concepts, specific, operational proposals. Here is what the Joint Chiefs actually wrote. They proposed sinking a boatload of Cuban refugees and blaming the attack on Castro's forces. The document specifically referenced using real or simulated attacks. They proposed staging a Cuban attack on the U.S. base at Guantanamo Bay, using Americans dressed as Cuban soldiers. Real explosions. Real casualties, potentially, from the American side, all staged. They proposed a "Remember the Maine" incident, a reference to the disputed 1898 ship explosion that preceded the Spanish-American War, using a vessel that would be destroyed in a harbor and blamed on Cuba. They proposed shooting down a drone aircraft, disguised to look like a commercial airliner, and fabricating a Cuban attack as the cause. The proposal specified that a list of fake passengers would be released to create the impression of civilian casualties. They proposed a campaign of harassment, bombings, and attacks in Miami, Washington, and other U.S. cities, all to be pinned on Cuban agents. Every single one of these proposals was endorsed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Every one was forwarded up the chain with a formal recommendation for approval. Secretary of Defense McNamara received the document. He passed it to President Kennedy. Kennedy rejected it. He reportedly was furious. Within weeks, he removed General Lemnitzer as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Lemnitzer was not court-martialed. He was not investigated. He was transferred to Europe, where he became Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. He retired with full honors. The document was classified and buried. It remained buried for 35 years. In 1997, the Assassination Records Review Board, a body created to declassify documents related to the Kennedy assassination, released a batch of previously classified materials. Operation Northwoods was in that batch. The document went public with almost no notice. A researcher named James Bamford, working on a book about the National Security Agency, found it and wrote about it in his 2001 book Body of Secrets. That book brought Northwoods to wider attention. News coverage followed. And then, mostly, the story faded. This is worth sitting with. The U.S. government's highest military commanders formally proposed staging terrorist attacks on American soil, murdering American citizens, fabricating passenger lists for fake plane crashes, and disguising soldiers as enemy combatants, all to trick the American public into supporting a war. This proposal reached the president's desk. It was not a leak. It was not a disgruntled officer's rogue memo. It went through proper channels. The official response, when Northwoods became public, was largely to treat it as a historical curiosity, a dark moment, an outlier. The system worked, after all. Kennedy said no. But that framing raises more questions than it answers. If this proposal made it all the way to the president's desk, with full endorsement from the Joint Chiefs, how many proposals like it did not make it that far? How many were approved at intermediate levels and executed without presidential knowledge? How many never needed approval because they were small enough to fly below the accountability threshold? The historical record shows Northwoods was not the only operation in this category. Operation Mockingbird, the CIA's documented campaign to plant stories in American news media. COINTELPRO, the FBI's program to infiltrate, discredit, and destroy domestic political organizations. MKUltra, the CIA's human experimentation program on unwitting American and Canadian citizens, including administering LSD to mental patients, prisoners, and unwitting civilians. All of these are declassified. All of them were denied before they were confirmed. Northwoods sits in a specific and uncomfortable place in that history. It is the clearest documented evidence that the machinery of the American national security state was willing to kill Americans to serve a geopolitical goal, and that the plan was considered normal enough to submit through official channels, formatted as a standard military proposal, professionally typed, properly classified, with routing slips and cover letters. The men who wrote and approved this document believed that proposing to murder American civilians and blame a foreign government was an appropriate use of government stationery. Kennedy stopped it. Kennedy was killed 18 months later in Dallas. No reputable investigation has connected those two facts, but history has never fully closed the door between them. The document is in the National Archives. Read it yourself. Northwoods is not a theory. It is a primary source. The next time someone tells you that governments don't operate this way, that the scale of coordination required makes cover-ups impossible, hand them the document number, JCS 1969/321. It's in the National Archives. It's been there since 1997. The question isn't whether it happened. The question is what else is still classified. If this case left you with more questions than answers, hit that like button, subscribe for the next file, and tell me in the comments, what do you think really happened?